Welcome today Dr. Diana Contreras, who is a new lecturer of GIS, Maths and Analytical Skills. So Diana is from Colombia. She studied in Colombia, the Netherlands and Austria. Before arriving in the UK, she worked in Colombia, Austria, Italy and Chile in the public, private and academic sectors, always on the topic of disaster management. Her most recent appointment before joining Cardiff University in July this year was at Newcastle University as a research associate for the project Learning from Earthquakes, where she started the research that she's going to present today. So with that, thanks very much for agreeing to present today, Diana. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Samantha, for the invitation. So today I'm going to talk about the role of social media and crowdsourcing platforms in disaster management. This is the structure of the presentation. I'm going to present the methodology and the results per case study. I'm gonna use 3 case studies for emergency response and early recovery, and 1 case study for post-disaster recovery in the long term. The idea of this research started on my previous appointment at Newcastle University. It was for the project Learning from Earthquakes. That was a joint project with the University College of London and Cambridge University. The idea of this project was to find new methods to collect data after earthquakes. And then I work specifically in the topic of in the data collected through social media. All of us and many people in the world use any kind of social media platform, such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Flickr, and young people more Snapchat, TikTok, and recently many people have joined OnlyFans, and we use it for several issues in our life. But when an earthquake or a tsunami explode, these networks explode with report that they are safe, or taking people uploading pictures to Instagram or to Twitter, or making comments on Twitter, or uploading videos to YouTube. The question is, what this data, what these social media platforms can bring us. So, and even some people report intensity through apps specifically focused to report earthquakes. These social media bring us information about debris, location of damages, message for donations, damages in buildings, arriving and distribution of humanitarian aid, and evacuation action. This is from Zagreb, a fan of the club, the fans of the Dynamo Football Club supported the evacuation of newborn babies from the hospital. And now somebody can ask, can have the doubt, is this data useful? And I will say yes, but then the question is, when is useful, for what, how is useful? Then I'm going to answer the questions ahead. And which data is useful? Then the post-disaster recovery is divided by several authors between 3 and 4 phases. I usually use the names allocated by the United Nations Development Program in emergency relief, early recovery, recovery and development. So now to have even determine what data is needed for each post-disaster phase and even before the event. So this is the post-disaster phase, and I'm focusing specifically in the data collected by citizens. Social media and crowdsourcing platforms can give us first-hand image and text data, from these both we can extract information. But how is the question, or for what? Then data from social media is useful for emergency response, to support the emergency response and the post-disaster need analysis, to support the earthquake recognized missions, the post-disaster recovery and to improve the preparedness plan in areas affected by earthquake. Then, but how extract meaningful information from text data? Text data coming from social media is called unstructured data. That's why we need natural language processing techniques like sentiment analysis. Sentiment analysis is used to determine the polarity of data. Data related to earthquakes or disasters in general will have a lot of negative polarity because there are a lot of expression of fear, anxiety, report of damages. But there will be also data with neutral polarity regarding to the information of the event. For instance, the epicenter, the magnitude, the depth, that will be neutral data. But there will be also positive data related to messages of solidarity, offers of help and support, emergency response actions that will be considered positive because they show instance of success. Sentiment analysis has been mainly used for customer reviews, and in this research I use it for emergency management and post-disaster recovery assessment. Why? Because the emergency response and the post-disaster recovery are services provided by governments to their citizens as customers. So that's why citizens have the opportunity to make the assessment of them. There is a second natural language processing technique that is called topic analysis. Topic analysis is to automatically extract meaningful information from text data by identifying recurrent topics or themes. Based on the data collected from the 2019 Albania earthquake and the 2020 Zagreb and 2020 Aegean earthquake, we make a list of these 14 topics, and currently we are working to identify the recurrent topics in the data sets or related to post-disaster recovery. So far, I have identified these 4. Then I'm going to start to explain the methods based on the case study of Zagreb. The 22nd of March, an earthquake with a magnitude of 5.3 struck Croatia, the capital of Croatia, Zagreb. 1 person died, 26 people became injured, and 2 people more died during the cleaning operation. This earthquake is special because it was the first earthquake that happened during the hard lockdown imposed by European governments to avoid the spread of the COVID-19. Then when the earthquake happened at 5 in the morning, people don't know if they should stay at home despite the damages, or they should evacuate and be exposed to the virus and to the low temperatures in that time. So what I did in that time is to identify all the possible hashtags on Twitter that will be related to the earthquake. And after cleaning those who having the lowercase and the capital letter brings the same information, discarding those who brought too general information and those that were not related at all, we came up with this list, and we purchased data from a third-party vendor, and also we obtained data for free for the Euro-Mediterranean Seismological Center, who developed the Lastquake app that I'm going to explain for what is useful. Oh, well, I can explain now. The Lastquake app, it's an application in order that people, that eyewitness share information related to an earthquake, the intensity that they felt, and the app combined it with seismic information. We extract the data, we translate the data, and we extract the keywords from the data. So, due to privacy issues, neither Instagram nor Twitter have georeferenced data anymore. And the main untitled and earthquake, the most important is to locate, to georeference the damages. Then what I did, looking at the pictures that Twitter showed, is first look at the landmarks. This is the cathedral, so it's easy to georeference. This is another institutional building that I think is is the Society of Fine Arts of Zagreb. In other pictures, I look at the name of the street. In other pictures, like this one from Reuters, I contact the photographer to know where the damage was, where he took that picture. In other cases, some pictures says my office and say the name of the company suffered a lot of damage on its building. So that's another way. So you see here, I say damage location proxy, because sometimes what we see is not exactly the damage, is the debris, but the damage must be around. Through EMSC, we were able also to get pictures of geotechnical effects of the earthquake that we didn't obtain through Twitter. So we collect all the text data. This is based mainly on the 10% of the data. So we can identify the phenomenon, where it was located, that there was damage, the infrastructure damaged, that in the case of Zagreb was the hospitals, the most affected population, the newborn babies, and who was involved in the emergency response, that in this case were the firefighters, the bad blue boys, it's the name of the Club de Fans of Dinamo Zagreb, and the Croatian government. Then here, I need to update this because so far we have identified from the data set from Twitter 39 location of damages. This is based only on the 20%. So, but as you see, most of the damage was concentrated in the city center, that it's near to the epicenter. If we make a zoom, we see the spatial distribution. And here now you see on the screen the pictures with the damages, georeferenced, and the text that comes with the images. In the case of the data provided by the European Mediterranean Seismological Center, that data is already georeferenced. We don't have to georeference it by ourselves. So this is the intensity reports that they got from the last QuakeApp users. This is the intensity report. And this is the data. This is the data that you referenced. As you see, we see again that the most of the damage is concentrated in the city center, but we also see other places that it was in the outskirts of Zagreb. And different from the data from Zagreb, we can have different from the data from Twitter, we can have more information regarding damages in buildings and intensity, because the app is designed for that. Then here we see the data georeferenced with the polarity, including the polarity. I make a zoom, and here we can see distribution of the tweets with negative, positive, or neutral polarity. And here we can see a map of the usability of buildings according to the damages elaborated by the University of Zagreb. You can see that those buildings in red, that means damaged, match with the location of negative polarity. I'm sorry. Then, if we look at the topics, we see that the tweets from Zagreb mainly address this, and the comments mainly address these topics: building damages, emergency response, seismic information, intensity, and solidarity messages. Here we can see the comments that mention damages. If we see here, that I cannot see because, if we see here, this is the Petrova Hospital, we see damages in buildings and emergency response. That were the place when the bad blue boys were were evacuating the newborn babies. Then if we are going to evaluate the emergency response, we have to focus on those tweets and comments that address that topic. Comments from last web users are mainly building damage and intensity. So finally, at least in the sample, the emergency response assessment based on Twitter, and it's mainly negative, followed by positive and neutral. But as I say, usually it's an earthquake, so it's rarely you will find a positive when the positive polarity will be higher. Mainly in the case of I have seen that in original tweets after the Albania earthquake. The dataset with the classification of these tweets, it's available for public consultation at the data repository of Newcastle University. Now, we move to the case of the Aegean earthquake. This earthquake happened the 30 October 2020. It has a magnitude of 6.9. It triggered a mini tsunami. I think 119 people died, and I think there was 1,053 injured people, and more than 100,000 people lost their houses. So in this case, the main source of data was the Last Quake app. Last Quake app, as I said before, it's an eyewitness application in which users can report intensity after an earthquake and share information about the earthquake, like this picture. We get from them this 9 of reports, and after cleaning those reports that we could not understand, others that we couldn't translate, that we couldn't understand, of those that report that they didn't feel the earthquake, we came up with this number of comments. Still, we purchased data from Twitter. And again, this is what we get, so we can compare the different sources. So the method is, we get the data provided by the Last Quake app users. The Euro-Mediterranean Seismological Center storage the data. They provide us with a CSV file. We translate it to English. We correct spelling mistakes. That's what we call processing data. And we did a supervised classification. Supervised classification is that I did it by myself. I didn't use any artificial intelligence, any algorithm, any automated method, because it was 2,518 comments. That's something that can be done by myself. So I classified the data into the polarity and into the topic analysis. The classification is available at the repository of Newcastle University, and here we can see the spatial distribution of the data that I'm going to present in detail ahead. So here we can see the reports of intensity that, of course, were mainly in Turkey and Greece, but there were also some reports from Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Montenegro, Albania, North Macedonia, Bulgaria, and Romania. Most of the reports were naturally written in Turkish, very few from Greece. And here we see the pictures and the comments from the Last Quake app users. The Last Quake user reported mainly an intensity of 3 in the modified Mercalli intensity scale, followed by weak, then light, moderate, not felt, and strong. So here we can see the epicenter, and here we can see in detail the intensity reports in the case study area. Now, I'm going to present you the rules to classify the data. So these are the rules to classify the data into positive polarity, negative polarity, and neutral polarity. And here we can see some sample of the comments classified as positive, negative, and neutral. And here we can see the word clouds, when we can see that in the positive data, we see that the people with positive comments with positive polarity report a light movement that only lasts seconds. And if we go to relevant words, they also report a slight tremor with a short period of time. But if we move to the comments with negative polarity, they talk about a strong shock, and they mention that it lasts long time. And in the neutral data, we see that they start to mention cities, and also the location that they felt the earthquake, another place when there was an earthquake, I think the same day. So after classifying the data per intensity, we see that the comments with negative polarity increase while the intensity in the modified Mercalli intensity also increase. So, and here is totally negative, but there is only one comment reporting an intensity of 10. So if we want to stay with representative data, we can see that, or we can say in the other way, positive polarity is reduced when the intensity is higher. I tried to prove it doing a correlation analysis, and I can prove that there is a significant correlation between the increase in the intensity and the decrease in positive polarity. But unfortunately, I couldn't prove the same. I couldn't prove that there is a positive correlation between the increase in negative polarity and the increase in intensity. There is that very significant correlation between the positive and between the number of comments with positive polarity and the number of comments with neutral polarity, and also between number of comments with negative polarity and number of comments with neutral polarity. Now, if I georeference the comments, including their polarity, we see that the negative polarity is mainly distributed along the coast and on the Greek islands. And if we go to topics, I want to show you some of the comments that address the topics of building damage, lifeline affected, and tsunami impact. And here we can see the spatial distribution of the topics. I would like to focus on comments that address the topic of building damage that are located along the coast and in the Greek island. Lifeline affected, we can see here, again, along the coast, and the tsunami effects mainly in the Greek islands and in the coast, near to Izmir. That's for the cases of emergency response and early recovery. Now we move to the case of L'Aquila, that it's a case of recovery in the long term. The 10th April 2019, it was the 10th anniversary of the earthquake in L'Aquila, located in Italy. This earthquake produced 308, due to this earthquake, 308 people died. At least 1,500 people were injured, and 67,500 lost their homes, and 100 buildings, mainly in the historic city center, were destroyed. Then what I did is I monitored the activity on Twitter during the 10th anniversary, that was the 6th April 2019. And I saw a lot of activity. I collect data by myself, but later we decided to purchase the data. And here we can see the activity. Here we can see a sample of the tweets related to the post-disaster, to the anniversary, reconstruction, survivals, the commemoration ceremony, the churches already reconstructed. And here we see the method. Again, we identify the hashtag related to the anniversary of the earthquake. We select the most common hashtag, we purchase the data, we extract the data, we process the data, and we classify it comparing the supervised classification done based on the knowledge of expert and a pre-trained classification model, and we determine the polarity of the data per day during the observation period. And we also identify, group it or cluster the data with the positive, neutral, and negative polarity. So we see that the text data extracted from Twitter 2 days before the anniversary is mainly neutral. Then it start to be negative to reach a peak to reach a peak, the negative polarity, the exact day of the earthquake, to drop the next day, start to be positive, and later that Twitter data that it was not related to the earthquake surpasses the polarity. There is a bad practice from some Twitter users is that when they need to promote something, they include the hashtags with the trending topics, even if they don't have any relation with those hashtags. That's why we have no related data. If we base it, the assessment of the post-disaster recovery process of the opinion of citizens expressed on Twitter, we see that the opinion is divided, but it's still mainly negative, followed by neutral and positive. Here we can see a sample of tweets classified into negative, neutral, positive polarity, and not related polarity. Well, in this case, this not related tweet, it was related to the weather. And here we can see the keywords that allow us to determine the polarity. Now, if we look at the negative polarity, we see how people feel. They in L'Aquila, they feel like a forgotten generation. They still felt pain. They mentioned the historic city center that was the most affected, and they talk about an open wound because they relate the presence of steel machinery and buildings in reconstruction with the fact that the city center is still in reconstruction with an open wound. They mentioned still the presence of rubble. They felt like victims. Of course, they mentioned the politicians that had been in charge of the reconstruction. The neutral polarity, it's mainly about the commemoration ceremony. And the data with positive polarity, they talk about the reconstruction. They mention the Gran Sasso because it's a natural park near to L'Aquila that can be attractive for tourists. And it mentioned the Ministry of Tourism, Agriculture, and Forestry because one of their officials said that she proposed to explore the touristic potential of L'Aquila to boost the recovery. If we see we make a general word cloud with all the text data related to the post-disaster recovery, we see that the main word or the most frequent is reconstruction, followed by city, rubble, people, memory, and steel. If we look at the terms, well, because it was the commemoration, the most frequent term is the torch procession, which was the act to commemorate the 10 years of the earthquake. How people feel like a forgotten generation. The Prime Minister Conte, that was the Prime Minister for the time of the anniversary. And the Minister Andrea Priante, who was the official who proposed to explore the touristic potential of L'Aquila to boost the recovery. The dataset is also available in the data repository of Newcastle University. Then, what are the limitations? Well, the lack of georeferential data on Twitter and Instagram that can be overcome using the data from LastWave app, but still, the data is different. The data from LastWave app is more useful for determining damages in buildings, geotechnical effects and intensity, while if you want an awareness of the situation, Twitter, it's a better source. Lack of trained social media users to be more objective in their reports, and the cleaning and processing of the text data that take a lot, that is really, really time consuming. You want to make a reliable supervised classification. Also, the classification, when it's necessary to validate the classification rules and the topic identified with the, and to improve the accuracy of the algorithm. In the case of Albania, using a pre-trained model, we got an accuracy of 63%. And in the case of L'Aquila, the algorithm have an accuracy, the pre-trained model have an accuracy of 57%, which are still okay. The accuracy of every algorithm above 50% is still acceptable. 65% will be the idea. So the idea is to continue collaborating with the European Mediterranean Seismological Center to still getting data for other events, georeference data from other events, to train social media users, to reduce the time for cleaning and processing data, and also to validate those classification rules that we identified, to increase the algorithm, maybe customizing the algorithm to make a reliable supervised classification, and to have a data repository with text data from different events in the emergency response phase and the post-disaster recovery phase. So I would like to retake previous initiatives here at Cardiff University, that is the use of the Cosmos software. And thanks to Professor Omerrana, I knew about also the existence of another software for the classification of the text data. And the idea is to train social media users that first, after an earthquake or a tsunami, they should keep safe, then report that they are safe using any social media platform. This is just a suggestion. Second, report needs and damages. And because Twitter is not georeferenced anymore, every time that they report that someone is trapped, include the address. That will be very useful for emergency response institutions, and also for those who plan the earthquake reconnaissance missions, know where places they should or they shouldn't visit. So far, I have data for the emergency response and early recovery for the earthquakes of Albania, Zagreb, and the Aegean earthquake from Twitter and Lastquake app. This is the percentage of data that I have processed so far. For the cases for disaster recovery in the long term, I have already processed the 100% of the data. Process means clean it, translate it. The 20% of the data related to the Maule earthquake in Chile that happened on the 2010, and the 11% of the data related to the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. I would like to purchase the data related to the 5 years of the earthquake in Nepal, the 10 years of the earthquake in Japan, and the 10 years of the earthquake in Christchurch in New Zealand. These are the main references used for this research. And thank you. Odiol.
Great, thanks so much, Diana. That was really interesting. Does anyone have any questions for Diana? I can also see some applause emojis come up. So yeah, virtual applause for Diana. Feel free to join in.
Yes, I have a question from Wolfgang Meyer.
Yeah, Wolf, do you want to read out your question for the recording, or would you like me to do that?
Yes, I can do that. So, Diana, specifically regarding earthquakes, I was wondering what's the potential dangers of social media. And as I write here, I'm thinking Cambridge Analytica. You know, when foreign bot armies, or perhaps bot armies of political opponents, are set up to influence the public opinion, sow instability, chaos, and so on and so forth. So in the earthquake context, of course, that's important too. And are there any ideas to prevent this from happening in the future? I mean, the social media community, this must be one of the things right on top of their mind, right?
Yes. Well, what can be dangerous? some people from Twitter using from Zagreb says they write everything is destroyed. To be honest, the damage in Zagreb was very low compared to other earthquakes. But of course, maybe they are less used to. So reports that are too emotional or exaggerate the level of damage are dangerous. But I think that's why I talk about training social media users to make more objective reports than emotional reports. Solidarity messages are, of course, are okay, but it will be more useful to have reports of people who are safe, or to know the places when there is no damage and the places where there is damage. The data that we have purchased it, but we can also collect it manually. It's just to have a bigger data set, but we are not interested on the user. We are interested on the data on the text data that they produce. And when we include the data sets in the repositories, these data sets go to a process that is called anonymization. So we remove the Twitter handle, and in the case of the data coming from LastQuake app, we remove the coordinates. Still, the EMSC, they also modify a bit the coordinates in order that for instance, I don't know exactly the location of the user to protect the privacy of the users. But still, when you install LastQuake app on your mobile phone, they ask your permission to know your location. So that's what I say. Yeah, there is danger that people make fake reports, or too emotional, or that there are we need that to train users to be serious during the time that they can contribute to a efficient emergency response. Did I answer your question, Wolfgang?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wolf. I can see Ricardo's got his hand up too. Ricardo, if you want to unmute and ask your question, go ahead.
Please, Ricardo.
Thank you, Sammy. Diana, very nice talk, very interesting. How it's incredible how these tools nowadays can be used for the particular case of the disaster risk reduction. My question was about harvesting the data as well.
Yeah.
And from I understand, you acquire, so you buy that data from Twitter or Facebook or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, what control do you have on the way that data is harvested?
Okay, Ricardo, yes. Well, I can collect the data by myself manually, and that will be the advantage that there won't be unrelated data, and it will require less cleaning, yes? But if you want to reach a large data set, it's better to purchase it. To the data from Twitter, not from Facebook, to extract data from Twitter, you need to develop an API. And it shouldn't be that easy. There are some companies who are specialized on that they work with monitoring social media, mainly for commercial issues. And from then is that we obtain the data. And what we do is provide them the hashtags and the period of time that we are interested on the information related to those hashtags. The cost of this data depends on the amount of data that it is. It's mainly reports in English and English, Spanish, Italian. At least the API from our provider doesn't support tweets in Japanese, for instance. Yes. So when you buy large data set, that implies a lot of data cleaning, and but still you can have more data that you collect the data manually.
Okay, so you think, for example, it would be possible to use machine learning, for example, so for data mining like that?
Yes. Ricardo, you can even take the raw data and put it into a software that we use that is monkey-led, but can be used other software, and make an automatic classification. But if you haven't cleaned the data or processed it, then the accuracy of the classification could be low. So it's better to have a large amount of data and train the algorithm based at least on the 10% of the total data set, in order that the classification will have an accuracy above 50.
I see.
So what you did is you take one comment or tweet and you say, this is positive, this is negative, this is neutral, and you do that with at least the 10% of the data, and then based on that selection, the algorithm classify the rest, and that's automatic.
Thank you.
More questions?
Thank you for the question.
Diana?
Tell me, someone.
I don't see any at the moment. If anyone has questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put them into the chat. Oh, there's a hand up from James. James, please go ahead and ask your question.
I'm just
Hi,
wondering
James.
if there's a possibility that like the translation or how you translate it could affect the results in any way.
That's a very good question, James, because for the question for the tweets of Italy, I need the support of local researchers, and also for the Zagreb, because there are local expressions that only native speakers know, and especially harsh expressions are not translated by Google Translate. They don't recognize it, and you need it to determine the polarity. So you always need, it is good to have on the team a native speaker, in the case, and also identify native speaker of the area when the earthquake happens. So, you know, imagine that in Zagreb, we need someone who speaks Croatian. In the case of Italy, someone who is an Italian speaker. In the case of Chile, I'm lucky because I am a Spanish speaker, and most of the tweets are in Spanish. Yes. So definitely we need a native speaker on the team for processing the data, for the translation. Because unfortunately the algorithms and the works in English, so it's necessary to translate, and also necessary to translate it to English to make available to everyone on a data repository, and that everyone understands.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Had a question come in the chat from Thomas Stokes, and then Michael, I'll come to yours. I've seen your hands up. So Thomas asks, I was a bit confused on the classification of positive, neutral, and negative responses. Could you give an example of each type of response?
Yes, and try to go back to the rules and examples, at least for the Aegean earthquake. So positive, add those comments that report light intensity, light shake, solidarity message, emergency response, preparedness measure. Negative, the damages, the strong intensity, the aftershocks, and neutral, the information about the event. So here we can see some sample of comments classified as positive, as negative, and neutral. This is for the case of emergency response. Post-disaster recovery is here. We can see one example. There is a problem with the algorithms. The algorithms don't know the context, and they don't recognize sarcasms. Some people, in the case of Italy, write, "Hey, our politicians are great. They think that the reconstruction can last forever." And the algorithm classifies as positive because it sounds like something that is nice, but we know that it's ironical, that it's sarcastic, that reconstruction can not last forever, and the population don't like Italian politicians. But the algorithm doesn't know that. Yeah, this is an example of tweets regarding the recovery of L'Aquila, classified as negative, neutral, and positive.
Thank you. Michael, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure, thank you. Nice talk, Diana.
Thank you.
I'm just, one thing I'm grappling with in everything you've presented is how this information or how this research can be used. I mean, presumably there's a motivation here to support humanitarian efforts or rapid response, but I'm not making the link in my mind here between the research results and the benefits to early action. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, and you are right, because the research is still in an early stage. The idea is to collect data and classify the data from different case studies and compare the results among case studies with different socioeconomic backgrounds, and to see how they are affected and what they could need more during the emergency and early recovery and the post-disaster recovery, and to identify best practices in both in emergency response and post-disaster recovery, and to identify the critical factors that make succeed or fail an emergency response or a post-disaster recovery process. That's what I have in mind. That answers your question, Michael. Thank you.
Do you have time for one final question, if anyone has any? Okay, if not, I have one. So I thought I might not get a chance to answer because we had a flood of questions come in. I was wondering, so you mentioned, Diana, about how the social media companies don't give location information for privacy reasons.
Yeah.
But is there any, do you know if they would have any appetite for removing those rules in emergency situations? Because they obviously have the capability, like when Facebook asked everyone to mark themselves safe when something happens. Do you think that they would be interested from kind of a corporate social responsibility point of view in changing those rules for specific circumstances like this?
Well, that's a good question. The question will be who had the right to ask them to remove that privacy. Must be a government, must be an official institution, and it depends also their internal rules. Yes. Yes, that's and you don't know if one user is not interested that they reveal their location, even if they are reporting something about the airport. So it's very tricky. If you want privacy, it's very tricky. When you want privacy, maybe you don't share data on social media. Yes, you want total privacy. So then you don't take any risk. And if in case Facebook or Twitter agree to remove those protections, then you know specifically who will be interested that protection will be removed and who won't, under any circumstance.
It's definitely very complicated. I guess it'd have to be something
yes.
you could opt into, but it just seems like a good chance because, like, Facebook especially has so much negative press at the moment. You think they would want to use their tools to actually do something good?
Some researchers, they measure economic recovery based on the reports of people on Facebook regarding restaurants. And they can use it because when you publish something on Facebook, by default, you are giving the right to use that data. When you post on social media, you are already giving the right to the social media platform, but not the right to use your maybe internally for them, but not for others to know your location. If you share it, well, it's your decision.
Okay, that's great. Well, thank you so much. We should probably finish up there because we've just hit 2:00. But thanks once again, Diana. And the recordings of this and all future seminars will be made available on Teams as soon as I've had a chance to edit them later on today.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thanks, Diana.
Thank you, Ricardo.